leaked plans for future rail lines.
Planning work for future rail extensions.
The plans published on YouTube by a rail enthusiast.
The government has not funded them, but Transport for New South Wales says our documents are genuine. So the only reason we have these plans is because of Joey Hain. He's Train Guy 4 on YouTube.
Responding to the leak, the minister says he wants more transparency in transport planning.
These are just lines on a map under the Minns Labor government.
Well, that caused a stir, but, you know, it didn't have anything super important like costings or timelines. I'm certain you've already watched my previous video on the plan to fix the Sydney suburban railway system, but if you've been under a rock, a few weeks ago, depending on when this is published, I made a video about a selection of pages from a document that was leaked on my Discord server. A journalist from the Sydney Morning Herald saw the video and got in touch. The next morning, the story was on the front page of the printed newspaper. Mum, look, I'm on the front page! By the end of the day, it had been reported on by several outlets and even got the attention of the Transport Minister and opposition leader in their respective press conferences.
These are just lines on a map under the Minns Labor government.
Whilst in my eyes, the plan will be the best thing to happen to the network since Bradfield designed the City Circle, some concerns were raised, which I'll now address. Lots of people asked why direct services from Liverpool to the city were being cut. Some questioned ending the T2 at Homebush. Whilst this may sound short-sighted, it is actually a fantastic way to squeeze as much capacity out of the infrastructure. T2 will no longer run west of Homebush, as this is the end of the sex-duplicated line from Central. Past here, the line drops to only 4 tracks. This means to extend T2 to Lidcombe and connect it with the T3 from Liverpool, you would need to introduce a conflict between the planned T9 Richmond service and the T2 at both Lidcombe and Homebush. This presents an enormous operational disadvantage and is the sort of thing this plan sets out to remove in the first place. This doesn't mean that Liverpool is, as our friends at Restore in a West Line claim, the subject of a renewed attack, as it gains a new high-capacity service to Parramatta every 5 minutes all week, where passengers can change to the future M3 West Line to Hunter Street in the city. This, even including the change of train, will present about a 10-minute time saving travelling to the city, and perhaps a 5-minute saving into Parramatta. The amount of people who change trains at Chatswood now the M1 has opened into the city show the historical assumption that people will refuse to change is simply not true. Liverpool will also benefit from a more direct, entirely rail-based way to the new airport, with the change required at Bradfield South. Some question the need for the T5 to run to Epping, as opposed to extending the existing L4 along Carlingford Road, and I've discussed this more in the past. This would require a tunnel from the stop at Carlingford up to Carlingford Road, as the existing streets are far too steep for trams. They're about 1 in 7, and the low-floor trams we use in Sydney are only good for about half of that. Even with this tunnel, the tram journey would be slower than just getting a train from Epping to Strathfield and changing to get to Parramatta. The T5 extension, however, would provide enormous time savings, with a possible travel time of only 10 minutes, 20 minutes faster than today's bus. I saw a lot of comments, echoed in the media reporting, asking why their particular suburb isn't included in the plan, especially the Northern Beaches and Bondi Beach. This plan is predominantly a railway upgrade plan, not a railway expansion plan. It will upgrade existing infrastructure to enable more frequent, faster and more reliable services on existing lines, with the exception of T8 to Wilton and T5 to Bradfield South and Epping. The dashed metro lines are purely aspirational and are not part of the plan. The media largely ignored the bulk of the plan's contents, as to them Sydney Trains is a lost cause. The only articles worth writing are about how awful it is, especially compared to the sexy new metro. The truth is, Sydney Trains is the best suburban railway in Australia, and has been stretched so thin by chronic underfunding and underinvestment. The plan, if fully realised, which in fairness is unlikely, will turn that perception around. It will also blur the line between train and metro, but that's a different story for another time. Now what you're all here for, the new leaks. I have a further 4 pages from the same document, containing detailed timelines and costings. From these we can assess the viability of the plan and the priorities of the component projects. I also have further details about the upgrades to the future T1 from Penrith and Emu Plains and T9 Richmond services. The first page shows the intended program cost, year on year, to 2045, broken down into the various components. This shows the plan will cost about $2.5 billion a year over the next 20 years, or about $50 billion in total. That's about a metro level of expenditure over a similar time frame, but with far wider reaching benefits. Metro expenditure is set to tail off by 2030, but the exact figure is estimated only, so don't read too far into the shape of the orange section. Looking into the component parts, two continuous programs are evident: future rolling stock procurement, shown in beige, and digital systems, which is ETCS Level 2 signalling, in simple terms, a much more reliable and capable signalling system which would allow automation, higher frequency and higher speeds, shown in grey. These are both a pretty consistent $500 million per year out to the 2040s. The first major line upgrade is for the T1, with two distinct spends. Another page of the document suggests the initial spend will be completed by 2031 and will include rebuilding a large section of the Richmond line, grade separating the flat junction at Strathfield on the main lines, and widening the Sydney Yard Throat to 4 tracks. The latter spend, from about 2035 to 2040, will be amplification of the line from St Mary's to Penrith and a turnback at Emu Plains, enabling the all-week frequency of 12 trains an hour from Penrith to Central and the 12 train per hour peak frequency off the Richmond line, which will be transferred to the T9 in future. Next is the T5 spend. This is a very long project, so the total cost is spread out over pretty much the entire 20-year timeframe. First up is the extension to Bradfield South by 2031. After this, in about 2036, the first stage of the Epping Tunnel will open as far as Parramatta Square, enabling the 12 train per hour frequency. Then, for 2041, the rest of the line to Epping will open. The T8 is next. Starting at about 2030, we'll see the grade separation of Walleye Creek Junction, enabling T8 to run into Sydney Terminal without conflicting as much with South Coast trains. The Yard Throat will have been widened by this point. This will allow 12 trains per hour on peak to run from Macarthur to Central via Sydenham. In 2038, the extension to Wallandilly is planned to open, along with possible track amplification between Glenfield and Macarthur, which is shown on the map but not explicitly on the timeline. T4 will start slowly in about 2032, with South Coast improvements stemming from the Yard Throat widening. After about 2036, lots of money will be thrown at amplifying the line between Hurstville and Sutherland, and after about 2043, the fully separated T4 will be able to run 24 trains per hour along the entire length of the line. Finally, the T9 will see its spend, starting slowly in 2032 and expanding through to 2045. The first part of this will use the existing Strathfield grade separation and Yard Throat widening for Central Coast trains, and the T1 West diversion to Sydney Terminal, to allow T9 to always run onto the North Shore. Frequency will be supplemented by Richmond services, which would likely be renumbered T9 at some point and shifted to run on the suburban lines, making all stops between Homebush and Blacktown, once T5 runs into its new tunnel. The spending then increases with the planned amplification from Rhodes to West Ryde, making the section from Strathfield to Epping fully quad track, allowing 12 trains an hour to run from the north on peak, combining with the 12 trains an hour from the Richmond line to form a 24 train an hour service onto the North Shore line. That's the timelines and costs done. The other 2 pages include more details on the upgrades to the T1 West service and future T9 Richmond service. An interesting comment here in the programme blurb is extended lead times require planning to commence imminently, which somewhat contradicts the Minister's remarks about this only being a draft with no government intention so far. The programme is split into 3 stages. Stage 1, finished by 2031, will build initial resilience and capacity to allow future stages to proceed, including STAR Phase 3, which is the internal name for the Sydney Yard Throat widening, Digital Systems Tranche 3, the internal name for ETCS Level 2 on the approach to Central from about Strathfield on all 3 track pairs, and the grade separation of Strathfield Junction. This stage will allow 40 trains per hour in each direction into Sydney Terminal, and will fully automate the Inner West T2 service and possibly the portion of the T1, T9, Blue Mountains Line and Central Coast Line between Strathfield and Central. Stage 2 will also be delivered by 2031, but will focus on the Richmond line. This will see the line effectively rebuilt between Schofields and Vineyard, removing 3 level crossings, relocating Vineyard Station, and relocating Blacktown Yard, I assume to Vineyard. This will enable additional services, with 4 trains an hour starting at Richmond all week, supplemented by 2 trains an hour off-peak at Vineyard and 8 trains an hour on-peak. The remaining single-track line between Vineyard and Richmond has enough passing loops at Mulgrave and Clarendon to allow 4 trains an hour. The reason why Vineyard was chosen was asked in the last video, as opposed to Riverstone by a few people. It puzzled me at first, but I think I've figured it out. I believe it's a similar case to Pakenham and Pakenham East in Melbourne. The 3 removed level crossings at Riverstone and the fact that this whole area is a floodplain makes me think this will be a Melbourne-esque level crossing removal project, elevating this section on a viaduct. Viaducts make special track layouts like crossovers or turnbacks a bit difficult, and so it's preferred to avoid them, hence sticking all the special stuff at Vineyard on the ground, where a new station, possibly with an extra turnback platform, will be cheaper, and rebuilding Riverstone as a simple 2-platform plain line station. Vineyard will have a new yard, I'm guessing, to replace Blacktown Yard, removing the need to waste paths and crew running empty trains to and from Blacktown. Stage 3 will be done by 2038 and will involve quad track between St Mary's and Penrith to separate intercity and freight from suburban trains, ETCS Level 2 from Strathfield to Penrith, meaning suburban and possibly intercity trains will run automated from Central all the way to Penrith, platform rearrangements at Penrith, and a new turnback platform at Emu Plains, as well as relocating Penrith Yard, but to where I don't know, possibly Emu Plains? Under this stage of the programme, T2 will be cut back to Homebush, and I assume this will also be the point Richmond trains switch to T9 and run all stops between Blacktown and Homebush on the suburban lines. Stage 1 is planned to take 2 years to design and 4 or 5 years to build, costing between $1.5 and $1.8 billion. Stage 2 will have a 2 or 3 year design period and a 4 or 5 year delivery period, with a budget of between $1.9 and $2.2 billion. And Stage 3 will have a design time of 2 or 3 years, a delivery time of 5 or 6 years, and a budget between $3.8 and $6.1 billion. I hope you found this second batch of leaks interesting, and they give the plan slightly more credibility and believability. Given the commotion around the last leaks, I'm keenly looking forward to any government responses. The files will be available on my website in the link in the description. As usual, thanks to my channel members for their support, and thank you for watching.
These are just lines on a map under the Minns Labor government.